Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Soul Brother coming at you with another program because I, as Dr. Soul Brother, the have a remedy to cure your ills. This program I feel is very important because there's some things that have come up recently. Well, it's been coming up for a while, but it's come up more recently that I feel need to be addressed. For one thing, while it has to do with Vice President Kamala Harris, it, truth be told, has um, a lot to do with a lot of other folk who fit her profile. I'm not going to make this a political discussion, conversation, not conversation, talk. I'm not going to get into that, but it has to do with her personally. Um, there are people who are of the belief that Kamala Harris is not a black woman and that she um, is Indian and all the rest of that. We need to make some things real clear. First of all, for those who are not clear, Vice President Kamala Harris is the product of her mother and father. She and her sister, I should say, she and her sister Maya are the product or products of their mother and father. Their father, Mr. Donald Harris, a black man from Jamaica. Um, Her mother, Miss um, Dr. Harris, I believe her name was Shamala Harris. If I'm not pronouncing it right, forgive me. But she was from India, and the mother and father met in grad school at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, in the 1960s. And this is where they met. Later got married and produced two children. Now, while Vice President Kamala Harris and her sister Maya were the products of mixed marriage, black man, Indian woman, according to Vice President Kamala Harris, as well as others who knew them, said that her mother made them acutely aware that they were going to be raised and looked upon as black girls here in the United States. And that's how they were raised. But not only that, they were raised in black environments. Okay? So this crazy notion that Kamala Harris, people try to rob her of her black identity is insane. I also want to talk about the era that she came of age. Remember, she's born 1964. So, being born in 1964, what happened? That was the turbulent 1960s. And so, that means if she's born 1964, by the 1970s, she's a young girl. And yes, it's true that 5 years, I believe it's 5 years of her life was spent in Canada later on. That's another the matter. But the fact of the matter is, while she had spent 5 years in Canada, she and her sister would come home for the break, come home for the summer, and spend time in the Oakland community where they were from. But again, while I'm addressing this whole notion about Kamala Harris not being black, I also want to broaden this and go deep into this regarding other people. Um, if you're going to look at somebody like Kamala Harris and say she's not black, you have to ask the question, why wasn't that done back in the day? And it wasn't. For some of these people who decide to go down this rabbit hole and become disruptive, some of you are too old for this. Now, for the younger folk who are around now who didn't come up during that era, and let's say they're youngsters, let's say they're 20, or let's say they're 14, 15 years old. While that's a problem, I kind of give them a pass because they their paradigm is different. But I want to say to them who are listening to my voice, just know and understand. During the time of Kamala Harris's upbringing, it was understood. Even if you were of mixed parentage, you were black. Period. Period. Um, there's a woman by the name of Professor Melina Abdullah who is, I believe, at Cal State L.A. She too is of mixed parentage. White father, black mother. She too was raised as black, and not only that, she, like Vice President Kamala Harris, is from Oakland. And another similarity: Vice President Kamala Harris, as a result of being surrounded by black friends of her mother, um, she had play aunties, play uncles, etc. You know how we do in the black community: play uncle, play auntie, play cousin, play sister, play brother, etc. A lady by the name of Christine Simmons, who was active in Alpha Kappa Alpha, the chapter in Oakland. She pledged at Howard University, I believe sometime in the early 1950s. And so she served as a model for Kamala Harris, to the point where there was no question that when Kamala Harris got ready to finish high school, that she would go to Howard University and ultimately pledge Alpha Kappa Alpha. So that's the answer to that. And let's be clear: while Kamala Harris was a student at Howard University, it was clear to everyone who knew her that she was black. Period. There was no confusion. And I want people to show where the receipts where Kamala Harris has given pushback to her black identity and has passed herself off as Indian. You have no receipts for that. And this recent thing that was done on this one woman's podcast suggesting such, you should be ashamed of yourself because you know better. Now you're outright lying, or as the old folks used to say, telling stories. That's what you're doing. And that's a problem. We can't have this. It means you have an agenda. You have an agenda. Now, let me broaden this. We need to be clear. There's a scene in the movie A Soldier Story, and please bear with me. Stay with me on this, where Captain Davenport, played by Howard Rollins, tells the character played by Denzel Washington, after it comes out that he killed Sergeant Waters, black man, he looks at Denzel Washington's character, Howard Rollins that is, looks at his character and says, "Who gave you the right to judge, to decide who is fit to be a Negro and who is not?" Now, while that is in that context, that statement right there is applicable in this situation. This is where I have to get on some of our dark brothers and sisters who have tried to use melanin as a way to weaponize against our brothers and sisters who are of a lighter hue. How dare you? How dare you? Who do you think you are? That's my question. And this is a dark skinned black man talking, by the way. Let's be clear. Dr. Soul Brother is a dark skinned black man who has a problem with that. We understand what melanin is, we understand the purpose of melanin. But at the same time, you do not, I repeat, do not try to use melanin as a way to weaponize against folks who are of a lighter hue. You think about this. If you have people in your family who are of a lighter hue, what are you ultimately saying to them? You're trying to do that to weaponize. And let's be clear, history is on our side with this. Um, there was the revolution of the 1960s. You had the Black is Beautiful movement. And we need to be clear. When we talk about Black is Beautiful and we talk about uh, taking pride in your dark skin, your broad features, your woolly hair, etc., let's be clear. That merely represented one component of Black is Beautiful. One component. An important component to be sure, but merely one component. The other thing about Black is Beautiful is this. When you watch the film clip, I think it was in a documentary or something dealing with the Black Panther Party, and this is 1968. And you see a very light-skinned Kathleen Cleaver, who was the then wife of Eldridge Cleaver. And it was clear she was surrounded by her sisters of a darker hue, and they were all sporting naturals, the Afro hairstyle. And it was clear there was no distinction being made over the fact that she was among those group of sisters at that moment, that she was of a lighter hue. It was a non-issue. Why? Because we were casting off the hey, we're all black. And what Malcolm X pointed out before his assassination, one thing about this racist system, it makes us all one. And it is shameful, shameful that we've gotten away from that. Anybody know about a activist slash journalist named Mary Church Terrell from back in the day? She was very light skinned. Are you going to deny her of her blackness? John Henry Clark, Professor John Henry Clark, my man, talked about how you had light skinned black folk way back in the day who were fierce black nationalists, and in some ways were more so than those of a darker hue. So we're going to turn around and give pushback and throw shade on those of a lighter hue, whether they have mixed parentage or just happen to be light skinned, because we come in all shades. You have people who are light skinned as a result of mixed parentage. Then you have those who are light skinned as a result of just maybe a throwback gene or something in the family. And especially if you have a situation where, let's say, one parent is one complexion, another one is another complexion, and you got a bunch of kids, it's going to be a mixed bag. You can have somebody dark skinned, you can have somebody light skinned, you have somebody medium brown, etc. We all have that. And so for people to turn around and want to throw shade on somebody like Kamala Harris, who clearly basks in her blackness, basks in it. And the irony is this: you want to throw shade on her and others similar to her, but yet you embrace a Meghan Markle? You got to be tripping. Meghan Markle, who clearly did not identify with black folk before she married into the royal family and when she married in the royal family. And let's be clear, the only reason why she's uh, belly aching about racism and identifying as black is because she got her behind kicked by the royal family. Had that not happened, trust and believe, not only would she still be in England and not back here in the US, but she would still be distancing herself from the rest of us. So this thing, these attacks that have come out unfairly against Vice President Kamala Harris are wrong and they need to end. But you see, in many ways, which is one of the reasons why I don't want to make this a political conversation. When I say political, in terms of organized politics, Democrat, Republican, I'm not into that right now. But what I'm talking about is the attitude. Because let's be clear, had this been 50 years ago, it would have been a non issue. And you know this. And for you folk who are out there, those I'm talking to, our darker brothers and sisters right now, for you, especially those of you who are of a certain age range, let's say were, let's say you're her contemporary. You're too old for this. You're too old for that, and you know better. And we also, let me go over this real quick here, because my time is limited, but I've got to get this in. For those black folk, let's say who were teenagers during the 1950s, which would make them now in their 80s, you lived through the 1960s as young adults, meaning that you were there during the civil rights movement slash black power movement. It was all about black liberation. And during the black liberation movement, we were embracing our blackness, taking pride in our hair, taking pride in our features, all those things that white folks taught us to be ashamed of, etc. Um, Also, those again, those who are of a lighter hue were taking pride in their blackness. And so you lived through that, and you ran across people who may have been of mixed parentage. You ran across people who were uh, light skinned, even when they had two black parents. You knew those folk. You had them in your family, and still have them in your family. And yet you wanted to, well, no, I don't consider them black. Like someone told me, had the nerve, the audacity, the unmitigated gall to say to me that Misty Copeland, well, I don't consider her black. Okay, let's unpack that. You don't consider her black, but yet Colin Kaepernick is black? Please make that make sense. Make that make sense. That is well, several things. One is schizophrenia. It's bigoted, and frankly, it speaks volumes about your character or lack thereof. It does. Um, Also want to mention this. That right there is a way of being divisive. And these are coming from people who are of a darker hue who profess, who purport to be about the unity of black folk. Well, if you're truly about the unity of black folk, you wouldn't that kind of rhetoric wouldn't come flying out of your mouth. And let's understand something. White folks love when black folks are divided. They love that. And again, you show me where Vice President Kamala Harris has given pushback to her blackness and has taken on an Indian identity. I find it interesting that her mother, who was not black, who was from India, who was Indian, was not from this country, not of this culture, and yet she played an instrument. She was very instrumental in helping to shape and mold the black identities of both daughters. And yet, in today's environment, you know who you are. You have folk who are undeniably black who try to run from their blackness. Explain that to me. You explain that. Lastly, I want to say this because at some point we're going to deal with this again, but we won't be able to get into it tonight. But I want to end with this. If you Google canopy and you have a library card, I would highly recommend you to go to that website, Canopy, use your library card, and check out a documentary called A Question of Color by documentarian Kathy Sadler, a sister who, incidentally, not only she light skinned but is of mixed parentage, who embraced her blackness, did a documentary 30 years ago, I believe, dealing with the whole issue of color. It's a must see, in my judgment. I've seen it several times. Several times. I would highly recommend this. And also, one of the other things that confirms uh, my point of view is when Mr. J. Morris Anderson created a Miss Black America pageant because he noticed that his daughters were watching the Miss America pageant. And if I have the story right, one of them commented on the show and he got to think, you know what, we need our Miss Black America pageant. And when he created that in the late 60s, and the first woman who became Miss Black America was a sister named Sandra Williams. Um, the thing is this, it showed what? It showed the wide range of black folk. Yes, this is at a time where, of course, black women were not highlighted who were of a darker hue, and that's because of the overall white society. But um, what it showed was this: just it wasn't solely for black women who were of a darker hue. I mean, you could have been light skinned, but the thing is, black women who were of a darker hue were highlighted. Now this was great. This is fantastic. Remember the sister named Naomi Sims, who graced the cover, who was a model, who graced the cover of I think it was Cosmopolitan magazine in '68, and graced the cover of Life magazine in '69. You can Google her, and so a very attractive woman. And this is against the backdrop of Black is Beautiful. But in embracing Black is Beautiful, it needs to be made clear that this is not done or was not done at the expense, or I should say at the expense, it was not done to diss those women who are of a lighter hue. This was done to say, hey, this is uh, uh, this represents Black is Beautiful as well. And one of the other things that needs to be noted is this. Um, just on a personal note, I had two cousins, one dark skinned, the other one light skinned, and they were distant cousins, and they were thick as thieves. Okay, thick as thieves. So there's no disunity here. And if you can go to YouTube and check out the song "Is It Because I'm Black" by Syl Johnson. I believe that came in 1970, and um, the song "We the People Darker Than Blue" by Curtis Mayfield. That was the early '70s too. I want to say '71, '72 maybe, early '70s to be sure. Well, Syl Johnson in the song, I don't know all the song, all the words, but there's a part in there where he says something to the effect of, um, "We're all the same." He didn't say those exact words, but something to the effect, "We're all the same." And if you light bright, high yellow, dark skin, we're all brothers and sisters, something to that effect. And then Curtis Mayfield says something similar in the song "We the People Darker Than Blue." So this was addressed. This was addressed back then. And it bothers soul brother, that here we are in 2023, and this has become an issue. In fact, it's become more of an issue now than it was back in the day when we were um, embracing each other and ourselves. And this needs to end. So I'm saying this, whether it's Kamala Harris, whether it's Melina Abdullah, whether it's Angela Rye, who is just light skinned, come from a black family, but light skinned, Angela Rye, Misty Copeland, um, host of others, or even just lesser known folk, you need to stall them out. And as far as Vice President Kamala Harris goes, you need to stall her out for real, for real. Leave that woman alone. Okay? It's bad enough you have white folks, white media dumping on her. And now we're gonna dump on her as well. No, you need to stall her out. Stall her out. And all I can say to Vice President Kamala Harris, you came through a great time in the early to mid 1980s. From 82 to 86 is when you were a student at Howard University. That was a great time. And this man right now wants to apologize profusely for the backlash that you have received unfairly at this point. I know for a fact that 40 years ago, nobody would have seen this. And again, had this been 40 years ago, it would have been a non issue. And I'm going to tell you like this, you can say what you want, believe what you want. God don't like ugly. God don't like ugly. This kind of stuff is ugly. And if we don't put this in check sooner than later, we will pay for this. Actually, one could argue we're paying for it now, but you're going to really pay for it sooner than later. This is ugly and it's not right. And all that does is become more fodder for these white racist bastards who have always loved to see us as a people divided. So I'm going to end here. And at some point in the not too distant future, pick up where I left off here and go forward. Any of you who have heard what I had to say, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Please comment. I'd love to. Please do not hesitate to comment. And at some point, Dr. Soul Brother is going to hop on here and open up for questions. We'll do a live show and we open up for questions because I want to engage people. I want to hear what people have to say, whether you like, dislike, agree, disagree, etc. We can chop it up. So, Dr. Soul Brother signing off. And until the next time, God bless.